My Whitespine post got a lot of attention, so I thought I'd give a brief explanation of how it's possible to fold something like this from a single square sheet of paper without any cuts. The first step is to paste some reference material into a program called Geometry Sketchpad. I then overlay line segments on top of the key features of that reference material and turn those line segments into a set of measurements. And then those set of measurements are used to reproduce a stick figure of the reference material. Can't resist throwing in a plug for my book, A Scourge Awakened, available on Amazon. The next step is to turn all those measurements into a bunch of circles. Why circles? Well, if we look, for example, at this first forearm, that needs to have 2 claws, and the radius of these circles reserves the minimum amount of paper needed to form those 2 claws. It's okay, in fact, it's good for those circles to touch, because that means that from this point to this point is the correct distance between those claws. But then those claws need to be separated from the body by this amount, which is the arm. And so that's this concentric circle around the first claw combined with this concentric circle around the second claw. And what those concentric circles do is they reserve the amount of paper needed for the claws to have the correct arm length away from the body. Nothing can come within those circles. Once again, it's good for things to touch. So it's good for these circles to touch here. But if anything comes within the space of those concentric circles, then it is infringing upon the paper that the claws need in order to be formed. And then if we do that over and over again and make sure everything is arranged where circles are touching but not overlapping, we end up with this. The next step is to connect the centers of touching circles with line segments. Why? Because as I explained, the distance from the tip of this claw to where it joins the arm is represented by this radius. And then the distance from that point to the other tip of the claw is represented by that radius. Therefore, this right here is the distance I want between those 2 points. If we then do that over and over again between all the touching circles, we end up with what are called this set of axial creases. Once those axial creases define a set of polygons, or molecules as we call them, the next step is to fill in those molecules with other creases that will achieve a certain objective, which is, as I already explained, this distance right here is a good one because those circles were touching. This distance right here, the circles were not touching, so I was not able to connect those with a line segment because those circles were too far apart, which means something needs to be done to compensate for that. That something is this set of other creases inside that molecule. I'm not going to try to explain how that works. What I'm going to do instead is show you by printing out and showing you how they connect on just these 2 molecules right here. So here are those molecules filled in with ridge creases for the red lines and valley creases for the black lines, because you can see the red lines kind of make ridges and the black lines kind of make valleys. And what these folds do is they allow the edges of the molecule to all collapse down on the same vertical line, which is the axis of the model. This one also collapses down to that same vertical line. And so you can see here that if they had not been cut apart, if they had been joined, this little flap right here would be a hole, and that would be the feature I was trying to form. And then these other flaps would join with other things, and they all kind of wrap together and around each other to form the base of the model. I then take this 2-foot square piece of paper and painstakingly recreate all those axial and molecule creases along with the primary set of thinning folds, and I end up with this. I then make all those folds happen kind of more or less at the same time while the features kind of wrap around each other and form. And the end result of that is this base. It still doesn't look like a Whitespine yet, But the result of all those mathematical design processes gives us this base, which has all the flaps necessary to form the features of the Whitespine. But next comes the artistic part. I don't know how to accurately describe what I do here, but I just use a combination of instincts developed over years of folding things to shape the final product to what I want it to be. I use a combination of painter's tape, cotton string, and aluminum foil molds to bind the shape to what I want it to be. Because if you just let go of paper that's been folded a bunch of times, it's going to spread back apart. And then I spray it with water and get it all soaking wet. Once it dries, then I remove the tape, the cotton string, and the foil molds, and the final product stays in the shape which I intend it to be. I've got a whole case full of origami designs, so I'll be posting more about them in the future. In the meantime, while you're waiting, read my book, A Scourge Awakened, available on Amazon.